Welcome to Latinos Who Tech. My name is Hugo Castellanos. I'm an engineer and I work in Silicon Valley. I am originally from Caracas, Venezuela, and I've been calling the US home for the last 20 years. When it comes to Latinos in the US, we are 60 million people, but we're only 3% of the workers in science or engineering. As a professional in Silicon Valley, I've had the opportunity to meet some remarkable professionals that work in the tech industry, Latinos like me. With this podcast, I want to bring you a collection of their stories and how they got a job in tech in the first place. And if they had to start all over again, what would they do differently? I want to share with you career advice on how to get a job in tech, how to deal with imposter syndrome, how to find your tribe when you're the only one in the room. This is Latinos Who Tech. This episode of Latinos Who Tech is brought to you by Audible. Audible is the world's premium platform for audiobooks with over 150,000 titles. If you're like me, you're passionate about learning new things, but finding the time to read may be difficult. Audiobooks are a great alternative. You can get a free 30-day trial plus a free audiobook by going to audibletrial.com/Latinos. Go and support them since they support us. Thank you.
So, Brianne, welcome to Latinos Who Tech.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
So, tell me your story.
Oh, wow. Where to even start? I guess for me, I grew up by a single mom, the oldest of 3 kids. And I feel like that really shaped me. I'm super grateful to be 4th generation Tejana. So to be raised with, my own independence, to like live your own life, do your own thing. I'm so grateful. My mom has said, go as far as you can, dream big. I'll live vicariously through you and support you in any way I can. And so it's very, I want to say kind of the opposite of how we hear the story of most women are, taught to be calm and quiet and collected. And my mom was like, go out and play in the rain and get dirty. And I'm super grateful for having such a wise woman raise me, to be so strong and independent and to be raised again to dream big. I know when I was growing up, and like any little kid, they say, what do you want to be when you grow up? And I would say, well, I really want to help people. I want to be a doctor. And, but I've been singing since I was 3. So I want to entertain people and I want people to feel like loved and heard and seen. But like, I love pictures and I love that you can capture moments, and I would love to be a photographer, but I really want to be a teacher. I love learning and I'm obsessed. And so even again, growing up, both my mom and grandma, and I called her my momo, would sit me down at the kitchen table and say, well, you can actually, go to school to be a doctor because that's the highest degree you need. Spend time doing that, invest in yourself. But you be a doctor from Monday through Friday, and then you can be a singer on the weekends, right? Friday night, do gigs on the weekends at your home. But whenever you're traveling around the world, helping people, you can teach them about the cultures, take pictures of where you're at. So they kind of just helped me understand that, you're only limited by what your own beliefs are. And so I just always thought like anything is possible. And so in turn, as my life continued to evolve, I continued to keep pushing myself and challenging. And I would notice that I obviously would score high in math and science. And it was those 2 fields that really just challenged me. Whereas I loved writing stories. I love being creative, but that stuff kind of came easy to me. So math and science, it was just something that I had to climb that mountain to achieve. And that sense of accomplishment when I finally got that problem really meant a lot to me. And so as I continued on, like I said, I've been singing on stage since I was 3. So when I chose a path to go in high school, I took a hand instrument drafting class. Absolutely fell in love. I can't draw stick people to save my life, but I could draw a 3-dimensional isometric view of something, which just kind of blew me away. So after that, I kind of just started asking more questions. What can I do to do this? How does this relate to like any kind of career choice? And my hand instrument drafting teacher had ended up telling me, engineering, is really on path. I was really obsessed with cars and engines, just so curious about how things worked, levers, pulleys, gears. I'll go crazy for it all. To where then I started, pursuing mechanical engineering. Ended up having to go to college. I went 1,000 miles away from home, got put on academic probation. But even that had done a lot of internships. So I'm a very hands-on learner. Conceptual learning was very difficult for me. And so I knew I wasn't going to get straight A's in college. And so I continued to pursue more internships and co-ops. And so by the time I graduated, I had already about 3.5 years of experience. in different industries. But I was really drawn to manufacturing, how things were made, the process improvement, manufacturing engineering, industrial engineering, and ended up kind of finding my way through, again, different avenues, essentially creating my own rotational program for an international aerospace company, got laid off, started my own consulting firm, then went into automotive manufacturing, and then, kind of found that transition of doing exactly what I love to do between kind of the idea and concept of new industry, new technology, implementation to actually assembly lines, and what that looks like. So now I'm doing it full time for a nonprofit. Again, essentially, how do we train people? What's the ideas? And then how do we actually get that down to the local grassroots level? So again, like my passion for people and processes and really challenging myself has continued to be consistent throughout my entire life.
And not for any non-for-profit, for SHEP, which
yes, for sure, absolutely.
The two people that listen to this are well acquainted with SHEP and, and how much I am, and I think that all the lifetime members like us, we are the SHEP cheerleaders, if you will, because every time that I meet somebody that happens to be Hispanic, Latino, whatever you want to call it, at work, and they mentioned that, oh yeah, what is this SHEP thing or this ACE-HPE thing? Oh, okay, I need to buy you a cup of coffee. Come in.
Yes.
How much time do you have? Okay, we need to bring you in.
I tell people it's the best kept secret. I wish I would have known about it sooner.
Ditto. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. And so you did mechanical in school?
Yes, and that's why I said if I would have known what manufacturing or industrial engineering was, I wouldn't have had to torture myself with heat transfer and thermal system design. But I made it through a long and turmoiled path, but I made it.
That's awesome. Yeah, and again, once you're an engineer, like nobody can take that away from you.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
It's that way of thinking analytically and running towards the problems instead of away from them. That's I think that's pretty unique.
Yes, very much so. Even just like systematic way of thinking.
Yeah, it's like and again, it can be something as simple as okay, I gotta do my laundry, and you try to figure out like okay, how can I minimize the number of trips down to the
Yep, exactly.
yeah. So that's really cool. And I wanted to bring you in because there's this idea of being an ally, and again, we know that mentoring is important, also having a mentee, being a sponsor for people, but there's this idea of being an ally, and ultimately I think that a lot of people, and I'll include myself, is that we hear this word ally being thrown around at our workplace, that oh yeah, we need to be better allies for underrepresented minorities, especially in STEM. So we're talking about women, people of color, LGBTQ people, so what have you. So I want to explore this idea of as a man, as a guy, like how can I be a better ally to those women around me in tech? Because and again, full disclosure, I was actually invited to do a workshop for the Sheptina conference. And in the beginning, the workshop was pretty straightforward. It's about work-life balance, how to say no. And I pretty much say no to people every day, including myself,
right.
And oh yeah, maybe I shouldn't take that project. I don't have more time to. So that was really easy, So right. I wanted to do this podcast with a couple of friends from SHEP that are also lifetime members like us. And in the end, they switched the topic on me. So they asked me, okay, we'll come in and help us do a workshop on how can men be better allies for women. So I talked with my two friends who happen to be men, and I scratched that because, again, it was going to be an echo chamber. If it's three guys talking about how to be better allies again. So, let me bring my favorite manufacturing engineer and ask her, again, how do I ally? And I'm using ally here as a verb, because I see it as a way of something that I do every day in every relationship I have, whether I'm talking to my mentee that happens to be a woman, or I'm talking to my coworker, my teammate. So again, how do I ally? What's an ally anyway?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. And I applaud you even for your conscientiousness to, like you said, kind of acknowledge that. I think a lot of times we get, excited to share, we want to share, and, our hearts are in the right place. And so even that, as you know, again, building a platform, having a podcast, there's a lot that we can say and do. But to put forth an effort to actually have a different way of understanding. So first and foremost, to me, an ally is simply like coming from a place of listening before you speak, because I think we all are excited again, and it's all well intentioned. But if we're the first to speak, it's kind of the saying, right? That God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth for a reason. We should listen twice as much as we talk. And so that's the kind of thing where being an ally is simply first and foremost to me, like listening, coming from a place of empathy. Is we're all humans, but we have very different experiences. So you were mentioning some, whether you're a minority or LGBTQ plus, or, you identify as something different, just altogether, and so whether your experience is something similar or you fall into a similar box of someone, you may not even have the same outlook or how you even got to that reasoning of a result, even if you do both have, similar values or interests or, again, outcomes of whatever that looks like. And so for me, I created this whole personal brand about being a people engineer simply because I felt like people weren't being seen or heard as human beings. Again, we all have kind of the same needs or wants about wanting to be heard or seen or acknowledged. And people just really weren't slowing down to take the time to hear each other out, or even to take the time to say like, hey, I want to understand you better. I don't agree with you, but that doesn't mean, that you're not important or your ideas, matter to me. And so simply just taking that time to be considerate, to be conscious of the differences, and I know you and I, again, are both very passionate about the D&I space, diversity, inclusion, as well as equity. And so it's one thing for us to say like, hey, I'm different, I'm a minority, but to understand like, hey, just because we are different, like there's differences between us all. So how do we come from a space of understanding? And everyone wants a sense of belonging, but there's a difference between belonging and fitting in. And I feel like, especially, and again, in the tech world and the STEM fields, we're growing so fast and so rapidly that it's the new iteration. We're being very agile, which is great, but a lot of times is that system or that process foundation isn't layered or isn't constructed yet to have that sense of, well, what's right, what's wrong. Am I being, like you said, an active ally, or what am I doing wrong or right? Like we're still learning. And so I think even just being open to that conversation and understanding, again, first and foremost, to come from a place of listening and understanding is really important. I guess to me, the second part would then be even like to be aware of your own personal biases, your own personal experiences.
That's huge. That's huge.
Yeah. Even like the belief systems that you have, of I say Tejana, and like, what does that come to mind? Or even like the stereotypes, me being a woman. Funny enough, on my own podcast, I had just done a 3-part series about the definition of a woman or identifying as a woman, because my personality does not align with being soft and motherly and caring. I'm a very aggressive, very forthcoming, confrontational person. So, it's very opposite from what people expect of a woman. And it's, causes a lot of stress and anxiety for me, because I just feel like, why can't people allow me to be myself? And so it's those type of things of, again, allyship, of just understanding, like we said, being aware of your own personal biases, the stereotypes, maybe some existing belief systems that you're not even aware of, but you're projecting your own experience onto those others around you. Even the differences of values, right? Some people value things that are different than you. And so you may be judging them because you have an own expectation of yourself. But you're not allowing them to have that space to be their full selves. So it's that whole sense of self-awareness for yourself, to hold that space, to be emotionally intelligent, in tune with yourself, to allow others to just comfortably be in your presence rather than feel like they have to meet your expectations or be someone that they're not. Otherwise, they would get negative feedback from you.
Got it. And you touch on a whole lot of different things, and I want to be careful about going down the rabbit hole on each one of them. But I wonder, from your perspective, what kind of behaviors? And I'm talking, and again, a lot of people that listen to this, to put you in perspective, they are, young professionals or mid-career professionals, so think like 5 years plus, and a lot of them work in an office environment. And again, we have people from all over, from the US, from Spain, from Argentina, from Mexico, so you mentioned knowing your own biases. How do you go, in your opinion, how do you go about finding that out? Again, it's hard to look in a mirror and actually like call out, what am I missing or what am I overlooking? So how do you think people can actually look at their own biases?
Yeah. So for me, and that's a great point. I, again, had heard about stereotypes and biases or even beliefs. And I was actually challenged by, my mentor who had said, like, well, what are your values? And it's something that we're like, oh yeah, like I value family, fame, money, wealth, like, and it's just kind of something very ambiguous. But if I were to ask you, like, well, what are your values? Like, give me, 3 to 4, like just one word values. It's almost like well.
Yeah.
So funny enough, of course, I had started personally Googling like values. What's the list of values to even start from? And then kind of doing that deep dive of a self-discovery of what are things that I genuinely value, and not being judgmental even of myself. So it came, to the forefront that I value acknowledgement, feeling important, being recognized and seen, because I feel so much of my life I hadn't gotten that. And so anytime people don't give me credit or recognition, I realize I get very defensive about it. And so even that simple acknowledgement within my own self-reflection, and that's why, earlier I had mentioned just that simple self-awareness started to lead to, I have biases for, people that give me credit versus people that don't. I have bias for people who advocate for themselves versus those who don't. And I feel like my own belief system is those that don't advocate for themselves obviously just don't want it enough, or they're not, willing to do what it takes. And so the more that I kind of step back and say, wait, Brianne, not everyone's like you, right? Not everyone's as aggressive. Not everyone's extroverted. Not everyone's willing to speak up or again, be confrontational. I have no problem, just kind of saying like, hey, I disagree. Even with my own bosses, and people like freak out sometimes, like, oh my God, how can you disagree with your boss? Well, the A, B, and C, this is why I think that's wrong. So again, I say a lot of times is acknowledging and taking the time to be self-aware and build that own emotional intelligence within yourself really starts kind of painting the picture, because then you realize what you are and what you're not. And the things that you are versus the things that you're not. There are other people that are opposite. Maybe there's some people that are 3/4, maybe some people that are just 1/4 of what you're like. And so kind of understanding the bigger spectrum and then kind of acknowledging what those differentiators are really kind of put in perspective. Oh, these are the things I'm, not privy to that I need to be aware of, or that I need to slow down and be considerate of.
Thank you for that input. I actually, funny enough, you were talking about values and those one-word values. And I actually did this assessment that one of my friends, my friend Peter, he actually coded it up. And it's essentially a list of the 50 more common values. So things like learning, family, relationships, health, and all those things. And essentially think almost like a Kanban board. I know you're into agile, right? So anything Kaizen, you love that stuff. Yep. So, and essentially those are the 50, but then you need to pick your top 10, and then you need to move them forward. And then you need to move it to your top 5. And you can only like pick 5. And in my case, my 5 are learning, kindness, convenience, passion, and freedom. Those are the things that I value the most. And those are like the one-word values that I have. And funny enough, like things like wealth are not there.
Right.
Or things like health either. So then after I did this assessment, I took, essentially I did a mini retreat. I did, I live in California, right? So I over a long weekend, I went to the beach and stuff. And I was thinking about, okay, so what does this mean anyway? And I realized that this explains a lot of things, because I do all these things, like I work long hours, and sometimes like, Hugo, there's a project in Europe and we need you to fly to Malta in 2 weeks and do 10 sessions for customers. I'm in, let's do it.
Yeah.
Again, because I don't, I don't prioritize my health as much as I probably should. Or things like wealth, right? I'll tell you a story. I was at this conference at work, this sales conference, and again, people are going around this cocktail hour, asking, just having some nice conversations. And somebody asked me that, hey, so what are you into right now? And I mentioned that I'm really into podcasting, and I mentioned that Latinos Who Tech. And the very next question that this person asked me was, oh, how do you make money with that?
Yep.
So I clearly know what they value.
Right.
And hey, they're in sales, right? So, they're curious about, how do you make this sustainable? So it's funny enough, so I'll go ahead and put the assessment on the show notes so people can have fun doing it. And
for sure.
maybe find out about their values and maybe their blind spots. Because
like
in this case, my blind spots are, those things that I'm not looking at, so things like my health, or maybe another one of your values that maybe that we don't share, so.
Yeah. And funny enough, I did a similar assessment. And so, like I said, I kind of just started. And to your point, I kind of just started from the list, and I would check off things that like, oh, this, seems like really important to me, or I find myself doing more of these. So I also picked about like 10 to 15. Then, like you said, I narrowed them down to 5. So my 5 are growth, which also encompasses like learning, adventure, and habits. Authenticity is huge for me. And even just to put a name to it, like meant a lot. Resilience, that includes like strength and toughness. Servant leadership is a huge one for me, and that encompasses impact, compassion, meaningful work. And then my last one is acknowledgement. And even in that encompass like kind of recognition, achievement, fame, influence, respect, success, and wealth. And so like we were saying right away, I think wealth, but it's more so it's not even about having the money or, the money to do things. It's more of the acknowledgement to say like I'm at a certain level, or, to acknowledge the work that I've done. So again, like you're saying, kind of the more you narrow it down and really get to the root of it, it's like, oh, it's not really like having the money part. It's more about the recognition you receive, because you have the money, or because you are invited places, or, it's that kind of.
So do you like holding the trophy? Do you like that?
It's not more of the trophy. It's more of the acknowledgement of the work, right? So that's why, again, like the servant leadership, right? The impact, the meaningful work, getting the recognition of kind of that legacy, like because you did this is that result of it. So again, a trophy is kind of like the outward facing. It's much more for me like, hey, these are the lives you impacted, or because you did this work, this is what this equals.
Got it. So as an aspiring ally, I need to ask you, again, so you mentioned, what an ally is, the behaviors, the qualities you're looking for, but maybe, do you have like any stories or like examples of people that were allies to you, like how they help you? And again, I want to give the 2 or 3 people that listen to this an idea of, maybe I should do that.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point, especially to your point, can I give examples? For me, I'll say I didn't have as many as I would like. I do think a consistent behavior or effort that I've seen that helped is, what everyone needs. And we talk about it, especially again through SHIP, of, needing a mentor, a sponsor, and an advocate. So I would openly, readily seek out anyone who is willing to give advice, willing to sit with me, especially women of leadership or people of color in higher leadership, because I felt, again, like I'm an anomaly, you're an anomaly. Like I can talk to you about things more openly. And again, I'm not afraid. Like I said, I don't mind being confrontational. I'm very in touch with my feelings, and I wear my heart on my sleeve. So me knowing that about myself, I always went in just very vulnerable, authentic, and honest. And that has always served me really well. Granted, I kind of catch people off guard sometimes because they don't expect me to be so forthcoming. But I would say, again, I've been very grateful, and quite frankly, again, just kind of blessed and honored enough to have people that have served as mentors, sponsors, and advocates. One in particular was a director of engineering, and he kind of took a chance on me when I was an intern at this international aerospace company. And he was a director of engineering, a white male. But he just really saw a lot in me. And so I would say like, hey, I know I'm really eager. I want to change things. And it's really hard for me to be patient. So just having those type of conversations where I feel like my boss doesn't understand me, or I just need some type of, project to really to challenge me, to make me feel like I'm growing. And so he would help me kind of maneuver through ways, and I would go through him with my list of tasks and say, this is boring, this is boring, this is boring. I like more of this kind of stuff. And so just putting forth kind of, this is what I'm interested in, this is what I want to learn, ended up helping me oversee a $500,000 3D printer. And it was the first in the entire company. All the others, we were the first pilot for all the other locations. And so I was 3D printing, jigs and fixtures and assembly jigs and tools. And so it was really cool because then I essentially became Inspector Gadget on top of being a tooling engineer at the time. And so it's those type of things where, again, just sitting down and having someone there to listen, to understand, to hear me out helped me kind of create this unofficial role or responsibility that I was really interested in. And so it's those type of things where, again, just kind of seeking that out, one, again, as a woman or an ally to kind of be that for someone. And additionally, again, just I know I talked about it earlier, but the listening part, much more is actually having an effort to seek to understand. It's one thing to hear someone out, but it's another to really put forth effort to say, like, I really want to understand why it is that you feel this way or what's happening. A lot of women experience kind of these microaggressions of, it's not really what someone said, it's how they said it. Or
can you give me a couple examples?
Yeah. So one, I would be in meetings and I take notes like nobody's business because I have a really bad memory. And so it would happen time and time again where people were like, Brianne, do you mind taking notes? And it's that type of thing where, yeah, sure, I don't mind. But never would anyone else offer to take notes, nor would anyone ever notice and say like, hey, why is it that Brianne always takes notes? So it's a very kind of secretary expectation or task. And it was something, again, that for me, I would say, like, in all my team meetings, like, I was a leader. I'm the one that wrote, led all the agendas, the team meetings. I mean, that was something I was always used to, again, because of my experience as a leader, because of, even just my personality. I'm a very go-getter. And yet in industry, if I wasn't careful, I would kind of be tasked as the action item taker or the note taker. Or even sometimes men wouldn't shake my hand. They would go around the room and shake everyone else's hand except for mine. Yeah. And so, again, it's not something outright. They weren't being ugly or mean, but it was something that, I picked up on very frequently. Again, it was just kind of this difference of how they would act around me versus everyone else in the room.
Got it. And I feel really grateful for the fact that, you call those out. And also because, again, I work at this huge corporation, in Silicon Valley, and they actually have this training as part of, everybody's things that you need to learn, and part of our culture, is this idea of, so we don't call them microaggressions, we call them micro inequities, because again, there's not necessarily any built-in intent to hurt people. The consequence is the same, right? You hurt people, but it comes down to equity, right? So it comes down to, do I make those people around me feel included?
Yes.
And personally, I had to, and again, I'm a freshly new hire. I'm like 2 months in the job, and I realized that, hey, again, if I notice that somebody in my team, if I notice that somebody in my team would, again, it's somebody that I was an intern with before, somebody that I know from a previous rotation or a previous gig, I would greet them very warmly. And then whoever's next to them, like, oh, hi, nice to meet you. Hey, pa, how are you? So again, you're like very happy to see them, and that's fine. They're your friend, right? But again, how do you think the other person feels?
Exactly.
Or even, and another micro inequity that it really stuck with me, because the instructor, he was you mentioned listening, right? So giving somebody your full attention. And I'm a very auditory person, so even like sometimes I put my gaze down, and it's not that I'm not listening to you, it's just that I'm concentrating more on what you have to hear. It's kind of like when you're looking for parking and you turn the volume of the radio down.
Yeah.
Right. Or I don't know who listens to the radio anymore. You turn the volume of your Spotify down. So yeah, so for me is that. So being aware of those things, or letting people know
Mm-hmm.
It's like at the beginning of this podcast, I mentioned to you that, hey, Brianne, by the way, I'm going to take notes. So if you see me like looking down, I'm still listening to you, right? Like it's not
Right.
like I'm not texting my girlfriend like, hey, do you want sushi or do you want pasta for dinner? Like, no.
Yeah.
So it's just like letting people know, like just, I guess, finding out your empathy muscle and exercising it.
Yeah. And I will say again, like it's good that there are obviously, I feel like the tech industry and even the up and coming, more conscious companies are aware. But my experience in manufacturing, and again, I pray that this doesn't happen, but it wasn't even, again, microaggressions or micro, inequities. It was people downright being ugly, disrespectful, like rude. People, I was traveling with, two coworkers and both were Latinos. So there may have been this kind of machismo thing happening, but, I was flying to France for an emergency support kind of a task we had. And both of them continued to make jokes of, oh, we're glad you're here to make our sandwiches. I'm the only one with an engineering degree. They were both like business marketing guys. So again, I had the technical knowledge. I was the one that again was representing us from a technical standpoint of anything, and then continue to make these very I'm going to say like sexual innuendos. I'm very open about my own experience. I feel, like there are certain things that trigger me that I'm sensitive to. I'm very open about my past of being, sexually abused and, having been date raped in college. And so it's something that for me, again, people that I trust, and these guys were, coworkers I considered friends, to then me going and, helping get drive our mechanics to find cigarettes. Well, the trip took a little longer than expected. Who knew you couldn't buy cigarettes at corner stores in France? And so 30 minutes later, a group text between us and then our friend from Brazil was like, "Oh, what's taking so long? Is Brianne getting tossed around?" And so it's those type of things where, again, never ever would that ever be appropriate to say. Much less, again, for a coworker or again in a professional setting among coworkers. So it's those type of things where I want to make sure that we're very aware that there are people that are doing it to be malice and like they need to be, addressed, to be brought up. I feel like a lot of women would freeze, granted, like I've been there where I like don't even know what to say or we laugh it off because we get so nervous. But it's something like that where, it's too real that so many people do that, especially again in the manufacturing world where I feel, it's very rare to see a woman, much less a woman of color, with an engineering degree that like knows her stuff. So it's those type of things too. I think there is people that do it, without malintention, but there are also people that are doing it to get a reaction out of you.
What was the resolution of that? Did you bring it up?
Yeah, I mean, I'm grateful that my boss was really great. Our kind of supervisor that oversaw us. I talked to him about it. He ended up, bringing it up to HR. They kind of, took documentation of it. They quote unquote had a talking with these gentlemen, but there was never any kind of, I want to say like they weren't reprimanded. They were just said like, hey, that's not cool. Obviously you can't talk to, your coworker that way. And it was just kind of let go. Funny enough, I even, was interviewed about this on BuzzFeed and, a lot of people are commenting on the YouTube videos about it of like, this is disgusting. And I hope she reported them. And that's kind of the realization. We're even seeing this now play on the courts, right? Of people are going forward and saying, hey, they had inappropriate, conversations or they had inappropriate actions with me. And it's just kind of like, well, the majority of times you don't get the reaction or the justice that we wish would happen. But to me, again, it doesn't devalidate me standing up for myself. The fact that I said something, the fact that they were even just talked to, like, I'm not going to let stuff like that slide.
Got it. Mm-hmm. And wow, I don't know what to say.
No, and that's okay. And I think this is the type of conversation that's another part of being an ally, right? Of simply just learning to be comfortable with being uncomfortable, because it is hard, right? For someone to say that. Obviously, I called my fiance, my boyfriend at the time, and like he was so upset, like I just want to go beat the crap out of these guys, But the reality is that's not how this works. And so it's that type of thing of just having these conversations. And it's really sad that a lot of times women feel like, what if that was your sister or your wife or your mom? And it shouldn't have to be someone that they know. Like, we should just respect each other as humans, like regardless. And that's the type of stuff where I feel like, again, being an ally is realizing that, yes, sometimes, things get out of hand or people are oversensitive, But also there's another side of a lot of stuff that, it may have just been the straw on the camel's back because a woman or a person or LGBTQ or a person of color, like any, marginalized type of person has been feeling a certain type of way. And it's this one small thing that someone said or didn't say that, just really kind of just undid them. And so it's those type of things of understanding. It's these kind of small buildups where, again, it doesn't have to be something outright lavish or crazy. But these small things do build up and it really weighs on us.
Definitely. And I had a conversation, and again, about that buildup of those things that, again, your boss says it once, okay, let it slide. But then it's every week, and then it's every other day, and then it's every day.
Yeah.
And I have a friend that happens to work for, let's just say that in California, we call it a large fruit company that happens to make phones and computers. And his manager kept saying, hey, remember, the product comes first. And again, sometimes you have to be on call till 1 a.m. because you support customers in the other side of the world. And until one day he said, you know what? No, I come first.
Yeah.
And now that's his go-to thing. And I'm like, dude, like if you have to be that passive aggressive at work, like I don't know if any product or company is worth my mental health like that.
Right.
But again, as you mentioned, I'm a friend, so I listen, and I find that, and again, part of not being an ally only, but like being a friend is that meeting emotion with logic. When somebody's venting or telling me something frustrating that they're going through, it's like I need to like modulate and think, wait, does this person want me to listen right now, or do they want me to help them with a solution?
Yeah.
And more often than not, because because we are engineers, right? So our job is to look for solutions to problems. I find that we need to like, again, just like bite our tongues and just like hold on that, like, no, not solving right now. Just listen, listen.
Just wait. Yeah.
Yeah. And again, it's active listening. It's a gift. I think everybody should practice it more. And there's nothing, I did this exercise at this workshop that we did a workshop on mindfulness a couple weeks back. And we did this exercise when somebody, again, we pair up and one of us was supposed to talk for 10 minutes straight. And the other person was supposed to only listen. And you couldn't make any noises or say any words. And you could only like acknowledge with your eyes or body language or things like that. And oh my gosh, that was so intense. It's like when that bell went off, that it was the turn for the other person. It was like a like all the weight of your shoulder. So again, there's all kinds of exercises you can try, but like there's nothing like being heard and ultimately feeling included.
Yeah, and it is a skill, like you're saying, and you had mentioned like it's almost like a gift, right, for people that can do that so readily or so freely. But it is, again, like something you said, you have to practice. If you're not used to listening, again, and paying attention, if we're always used to thinking of our own responses, I never really get to hear your point. Or again, I'm not really thinking or processing, like you said, what you're saying. Especially as engineers, we kind of say like, "Ooh, I know that piece and I can plug it in here," or "Ooh, that made me think of this story and like I can add to that." So right. Like you said, especially the thinkers or the people that get excited. For myself, even I would catch myself when people are thinking of a word and they're thinking, "Oh, what's that word?" And I want to start helping. And that was something, like you said, I would start, take a breath, Brianne, slow down, like let them finish, rather than jump in and try to help or, support them or put in my own, what I think they're trying to say. Really just give them the time, the space, like slow down. You're in no rush. Really just allow them to think if what they're going to tell you is important. And if it's not, then you just let them talk anyway. And so like to your point, like being an active listener takes a huge patience within yourself. But then even also, again, coming from a place to understand and listen, like you said, whether or not they're venting or if they actually want a solution, allow them to say that. Because again, a lot of times people just want to be heard. You know, I don't know if you know the Dale Carnegie, like how to make friends and, you know, influence people, but that's the
Yep,
biggest
it's
thing.
right here. It's right here.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Same. I have it on my shelf too. Is that's the number one thing everyone wants is just to feel important, and a big part of that is just to be acknowledged, again, to be seen, to be heard. And again, we don't give each other that time or space anymore. We're in such a rush all the time. It's all I can like or comment or send a quick chat rather than like have this face to face interaction. And again, that's a big part of what's missing.
No, I agree 100%. And something that I really enjoy from where I work is this idea of the one-on-one conversation.
Mm-hmm.
That you can pick anybody in the whole company. You can pick the CEO, and you can have a one-on-one with them. And anybody will slice the 20, 30 minutes, 1 hour of their calendar to chat. You know, and learn about what you're working on, what your challenges are. You can make it as formal or as informal as you like. Granted, you know, I've had one-on-ones with VPs, and again, you know, you want to make sure that like you're providing value in some way.
Right.
And I find that, you know, for like millennials, like, you know, sometimes my value is the fact that I look at things in a different way. So, you know, they have questions like, hey, why do you guys do everything with your phone nowadays? You know, it's like, so, you know, anyhow, but I feel that having that structure of those 30 minutes that, okay, we're not looking at the phone, we're not looking at the computer, we're just chatting,
Right.
getting to know each other. I find that makes a difference. You know, so for anybody in my team, I make sure that I have a check-in with them. And again, it's not about, hey, how's the project going? Like, no. It's about actually like getting to know you as a person.
Right.
So something that we have built in is that we have lunch together like 3 or 4 times a week as a team. And again, sometimes we talk work stuff. Sometimes we talk about the weekend. Sometimes we talk about what Trump is doing in the White House. Sometimes we talk about technology, like what have you, right? But having those informal conversations makes me feel like I know my team better.
Oh, yeah. And I think that's really important, again, for you to take an interest in their whole self, like you said, rather than just the project or just what's going on with this or the things you know, again, 100% agree on, to get a better range and them to feel comfortable enough, like, oh, I'm not being judged, or, oh, I can be my full self regardless of where we're at. Or even that, like to have a break during lunch, you know, to kind of have a mental, okay, we can stop thinking about work for a second and, you know, just really enjoy being a human and making friends again. I think that's really important. So that's great to hear that you have that culture and you're kind of cultivating that at work.
Yeah, no, I'm super grateful. I mean, I think that one of the things that keeps me at that company is my team. To be honest, it's and ultimately it's the people that you work with every day. You know, it's that I read somewhere this statistic that the most frequent reason for somebody leaving their job is not the pay. It's not the money. It's actually a coworker or a manager being rude to them.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard the same thing. People don't quit jobs, people quit people.
Exactly.
Yep.
So, I mean, that's true. Ultimately. Like, like I'm not going to leave my company for another job that's, you know, like 10K, 20K more if I feel that the culture is not a good fit.
Right.
You know, again, if I go to a company that I'm the only Latino, Hispanic, what have you, I'm going to be pretty lonely. So, again, I want to move on to practical advice because I think that, you know, from those 2-3 people that listen to this, probably 2 of them happen to be men. So imagine that you have a younger mentee, happens to be male, and you want to give them some advice again, and they ask you, you know, hey, okay, Brianne, what can I do to make the women in my team feel more heard, more included, more respected, so they feel that they're an integral part of my team? What can I do every day, every week? You know, what do you think I should do?
Yeah, I would say, again, obviously we're talking about kind of the listening, like you said, kind of stretch that empathy muscle. Again, be self-aware, right? Doing that inner work is a huge one. But then again, kind of that back to the seek to understand part, the very practical part is very simply just don't try to be a knight in shining armor, right? So again, if you see that maybe have a conversation one-on-one with the woman to better understand, or again, LGBTQ or person of color, whatever it is that you feel like this person, again, is either marginalized or being, walked over or whatever it is, and just say like, hey, I noticed this, and let me know if I'm making this up, but it was something that was brought to my attention. I feel like, X, Y, and Z, or, someone had mentioned something and I felt uncomfortable for you. Is that something that, like you want to talk about, or does this happen often? Again, just acknowledging someone and sharing like your own experiences of what you're thinking or saying is sometimes, especially as me, and again, personally, I would say like, man, am I making this up? Like, people are telling me I'm too direct. People are telling me I'm too aggressive or I'm bossy. And it wasn't until like another coworker of mine was like, hey, I noticed like so-and-so, your boss seems a little impatient with you. Like, are you getting that vibe too? Or is it just me? And I'm like, I'm really glad you said something, because I thought I was going crazy. Like, I wasn't trying to make up a story. And for me personally, I never want to be a victim of that. But, if someone else notices it, it helps me say like, okay, no, there is something here. Right. So even just bringing that to the forefront. So that's something, again, one of just sharing from them, not saying like, hey, you're over talking her. Right. Because then you take that power from her, or again, that person, to stand up for themselves. Another one is obviously mansplaining. And I know there's different ways about it. And again, like you were talking about earlier, I know there's good intention there, but a lot of times I would say something, and even my fiance, again, like we were both serving in, ship roles, we were both volunteers before I was working full time. And I would have, this really great idea or feedback from other people, and I would mention it, and it kind of like would fall on deaf ears. And so then he would bring it back around, 2 minutes later to be like, oh, Brianne had a really great point. He wouldn't say Brianne had a really great point. He would say, like, reiterate what I had said. And everyone was like, oh, this is just so great. And afterward, like, it became very frustrating to me, because I would say, did you realize all you did was reiterate what I said? And he was like, yeah, but like, no one picked up on it. And I thought it was a really great idea. And I'm like, yeah, but you didn't give me credit either. You know what I mean? So it's that type of thing of, even though you may be trying to do something again well, or make sure that that idea is heard, is really kind of narrowing down on making sure you give credit to where it's due. And if someone is, trying to talk and she gets talked over, or you see someone that maybe is even more introverted, and it could be, again, man on man, and someone's just not as aggressive as someone else, and saying, no, I thought so-and-so had something to say, like, can we hear him out? Again, making kind of space for everyone to talk at the table. Another thing that I've actually been trained on to be a facilitator is, you do have these powerful voices that they always have opinions, or they're always willing to speak up. And there's always usually someone that's more quieter, or they take more time to think out what they want to say or their input. And so when you kind of notice around the room, hey, David, you haven't said anything today. Is there anything you'd like to say or bring to the table? And kind of one, I want to say, like, being careful that, you don't put people on the spot, that they're like all, embarrassed or nervous, but kind of making sure that you're being, like you said, very inclusive, making forth that effort. And then, the kind of third practical is just make sure that you educate yourself, right? If you're aware that, again, there's not many women in your field, or it is a male dominated field, or you notice that there's not, any type of resources or education or these type of trainings you were mentioning, there's articles all over the place. Like, just, do a couple of research. My thing is at least do some type of learning or education 1 hour a day. And it's been mind boggling just to, like I said, listen to a podcast, or, just look up articles, right? Even Google now just sends me all kinds of random stuff, like saying, oh, we noticed you like learning about this kind of thing.
Right.
And so it's those type of things of just really being cognizant, putting forth effort makes a huge difference, because then you're kind of expanding your self-awareness, your life experience outside of just what you know, and considering other options.
That's all great. And I would actually challenge people to, if they are considering having a mentee or a mentor, actually trying to seek out one that happens to be, again, the opposite gender from them, or somebody that happens to be, and again, when you pick a mentor, you want to pick somebody that has some skin in the game, right? Somebody that has the job you want to have in 10 years. Somebody that went through some similar struggles that you did. But I would actually encourage people to, hey, why not try to actually look for a mentor that, again, happens to be a woman or happens to be a man, or a mentee. Because I find that when you want to practice those conversations, and you want to actually seek out the limits of your assumptions, it's helpful, to have somebody that's real, right? That it's not somebody that from an article or from a podcast or from a YouTube video. There's these, and I'll put this in the show notes as well. There's this, I share this article so much. There's this mansplaining article, and it's actually a flow chart showing you. I'm sure you've seen it. It's like showing you how to, if it's mansplaining or not. And it basically comes down to, did she ask you to explain it? If she did, it's not mansplaining. It's good. Right. You're safe. So I mean that's a huge thing, and over the phone is tough, particularly tough, and again, if you've gotten this far in the podcast, we part of our job it's to hold meetings over the phone, and sometimes we can't see the people in the other end of the line. So it's tough, so leveraging things like I am or things like that, and actually ask people, hey, Brianne, is there anything else you wanted to mention? Or is there something else that do you wanted to share something on this topic? So like seeking out the quieter people, that's tough. But yeah, I would be super frustrated too if somebody took credit for one of my ideas, right? Probably not.
Oh, sorry. Like you were saying, like with a mentor, and I would even challenge to the next point of you saying, like, yes, get someone different, but even more so, like, have a variety, right? So, I personally advise my own mentees to have like a personal board of advisors, your own personal board of directors, and so different types of mentors for different, fields, for different things. I have almost like a personal life mentor, and then a professional life mentor, and then entrepreneurial, life mentor, and so like. There's so many different, I want to say as a human, again, we're so round, right? Like we're a big round character. There's so many pieces and facets to us to just think like, oh, Hugo, you're going to have all the answers to everything I need in life. That's kind of silly, right? So I could give great advice on, again, being a woman engineer, but I'm maybe still just kind of getting started on being a woman CEO. I'm still getting started on, having a relationship, right? Or I can give advice for what I know so far, but I've only been with my fiance for 4 years versus someone who's done it for 25 years, so acknowledging that, to have different people that you tap into for different reasons. There's even been people, where I'll have 3 or 4 mentors for the same thing, but to have those 4 different perspectives of, again, people that you say that I respect their opinion, but I know that they're giving different, suggestions, helps me get a better gauge rather than, oh, Susan said I need to do this and this is what I should do. And it's like, well, Susan said a little bit of this and Hector said a little bit of this. And, Marisela had suggested, altogether a totally different suggestion. So kind of having that collectiveness, it takes a village. And that's why even, psychologists say it's important if you have 2 parents, because they bring different perspectives as 2 different humans raising one individual. So even that, again, like tapping into different resources, different mindsets, different people of experiences to help it give that advice or to help support you.
Indeed. And I think that, again, if we actually, and I commend you for taking an hour a day for personal development, that's awesome. And I think that investing that time in books and podcasts and listening to content like this is think of people like Brianne, people that come to the show as your mentors. And again, the beauty of podcasting is that if you are an introvert or maybe you are shy about reaching out to people like you, is that, hey, you don't need to deal with that because I'm the one that brings the people in. So, think of me like almost like a proxy for you. Like I ask the questions for you. And again, is there anything else I forgot to ask you that you wanted to mention? Anything else in your mind, about being an ally? How can men be better allies for women in STEM?
Yeah, I think, again, you just made a great point of, again, like introvert, or if you don't know what type of questions to ask. Again, obviously, thank you for having me, but this is exactly the type of things and these type of conversations that I feel are really necessary, of why I even created my own personal brand. So again, I almost do like micro-blogging on Instagram, with a picture and just kind of what's going on, what I'm facing, like you said, my own kind of conversations that I'm having with friends, families, I get my own personal mentors. And so even just creating kind of the People Engineer podcast, having a personal website, again, having this YouTube and Facebook just kind of posts, it was just acknowledging that a lot of people started sharing kind of these SciComm kind of conversations, there's expectation. I started kind of seeing this women in STEM hashtag grow and creating that online community. And so again, a lot of people that had questions but felt either too ashamed or they weren't afraid of asking the wrong things. I realized again, to me, and you and I know, right? Like in the DMs, like I get blown up all the time. And so again, I'm by no means Insta famous, and it's not, what I'm shooting for. But it's just the type of safe space to have these conversations. Like I'll never be one to condemn anyone or say like, how dare you ask that? I just want people to feel safe to ask those questions. For me personally, I'm really passionate about kind of the life, career, and growth, because I feel like as a whole person, no one really gives us like a handbook of life, right? How to be an adult, how to, be successful, how to make decisions, how to even deal with our emotions. And so kind of, again, being that whole person is very important. And I obviously love what you're doing with the podcast and all the great people that you've interviewed. So again, I just think it's having that story of, again, being an ally, simply supporting one another. Again, if you have insecurities or you have your own projections, like really just kind of dealing with what you're doing first and foremost. Obviously, you and I both are here for those conversations, for that type of community. But again, I just feel like it's something that we shouldn't be afraid of. I know that there's very such polar, I want to say opposites and oppositions happening in our world today. And to my point, again, if you're coming from a place of good-hearted intention, you make your wants and needs known of, hey, I want to learn more. I don't think that there's anything wrong with that. But again, like you were mentioning earlier, just be very conscious of how, when, and why you're asking. People obviously are wanting to come from a good place. We want to learn and support each other. But again, just be conscious of what you're doing, how you're doing it. And again, just come from a place of love, right? If you are very, I want to say kind, coming from a place of love and wanting to be understood as well as understanding others, I don't really think there's any place you could go wrong. Maybe you could say something wrong or ask something different in a different way. But again, if you just come from a place of, I want to understand, I want to be better, we're all growing. We've all made mistakes. So that kind of place of vulnerability and authenticity goes a long way.
That's awesome. And now we know where you are, the people engineer.
Yes, the people engineer. Yeah.
That's awesome. So yeah, we'll link to your show on the show notes, or just check it out at your website, all the good stuff. I know that you're putting out some great content out there. So I definitely want people to find out more about it and who you are and why you do the great things you do.
Thank you. Likewise. I very much appreciate it. This effort has been wonderful to follow and participate in. So I really appreciate all the great things you're doing.
My pleasure. So thanks for coming to the show.
Absolutely. Thank you.